Kyle, Pierre, Dan, and gentlemen, you know what I like to do the odd time when the season's not started, whether it be baseball, basketball, hockey, you look at the standings and it's all zeros.
Mm.
Every team has a shot. And right now, looking at the NHL standings before anyone reports to camp, before anything official begins, it's all zeros, baby. There's just something so pure, and the potential is endless when you are in this position, Pierre, because every team goes into camp saying, we got a shot.
And Toronto has more than a shot, though, Dan. And I would tell you this right now. Kyle would agree, I hope. The truth of the matter is, I think the Toronto Maple Leafs had one of the best off seasons of any team in the National Hockey League. And people are saying, what about Florida? What about Tampa? What about Buffalo? What about how hard the Atlantic Division is? I think the Toronto Maple Leafs actually made the division even better and harder to play in because of sort of really proactive management stuff from John Chayka and Matt Sundin. And I think the biggest thing that has to happen for Toronto, get out of the gate early so that the players believe in the messaging from Jim Hiller. And if they get out of the gate early in a good way, I think the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to be really difficult to play against, Dan.
And Pierre, going through this Atlantic division and seeing how they stack up individually against these teams, they addressed the biggest concerns because they always had the front of the lineup firepower. Yes, Austin Matthews had a down year. He was injured and nothing was clicking for this team, but the names are still on this team, obviously with Willie, obviously with Tavares. Nice. They have firepower. It was the bottom end of the lineup, and they've now addressed that. They've addressed stability at the very least in net. We don't know if they're going to get a superstar performance, but they're definitely getting stability. So if you go through these Atlantic teams, Florida, Detroit, Ottawa, Boston, the four I just named there, you can't tell me the Leafs don't run parallel with at least those four, possibly Montreal as well.
No, they definitely do. And I think, look at every one of those teams has a little bit of a conundrum they have to answer to. So let's use Montreal as an example. Their offseason shopping list was supposed to include a right defenseman that could make an impact in terms of being a shutdown guy. That hasn't been addressed yet. Now, maybe they think they have the answer in house. We'll see whether they do or they don't, in David Reinbacher in particular. But let's talk about the Florida Panthers. Do we think the Florida Panthers are better in goal with Markstrom compared to Bobrovsky? I would beg to differ. I haven't seen Markstrom stand and deliver the way Bobrovsky has over the course of his career. And I know people are saying, well, Bobrovsky's 37 years old. Without very many injuries, if any injuries at all. I think Bobrovsky playing behind a well-disciplined, good offensive team, like I believe Toronto will be, I think that's going to be a problem for the rest of the Atlantic Division. People talk about Detroit. They have sat on their hands, and I have never seen a team fire a general manager in July and not have a replacement by the middle part of August. It's like there's so much topsy-turvy stuff in what has to be considered probably the best division in hockey when you talk about the Atlantic. Some people in the central part of the United States and Canada would say, don't sleep on the central, especially with the development of Utah and the way Minnesota's played. And a lot of people think St. Louis had a great offseason. But I would say the Atlantic is as hard or better than any other division in hockey. So I think the Leafs have done fantastically well.
Kyle and I are surrounded by Leafs fans. We hear about Leafs fans' problems day in and day out. And if you ever bring up the Montreal Canadiens, Leaf fans will say, smoke and mirrors, smoke and mirrors. That's not a real. I think the claim that it's smoke and mirrors, that can be thrown out the window now with the Montreal Canadiens.
100%. The Montreal Canadiens are for real. They went to the Eastern Conference Final. They got beat up pretty good by Carolina. But remember, they had to play a 7-game series against Tampa. They had to play a 7-game series against Buffalo. Two teams that were bigger than them, two teams that were more physical than them, and they found a way. Jakub Dobeš was a big part of that. Jakub Dobeš has been signed to a 3-year extension at a very digestible rate. They also have Jacob Fowler, who's an outstanding young prospect, probably the best goalie prospect outside of the NHL if you were to talk to most teams. So Montreal's real good in goal. They're very good at I would say, on defense and getting better, especially if Reinbacher and Adam Engstrom evolve the way I think a lot of people hope they will. And I think the biggest question for them is what's going to happen with their second center. But outside of that, they've got firepower, they've got speed, they have an identity, they've got goaltending, and they've got a coach that the players are really comfortable with.
And you just mentioned the Carolina Hurricanes there, Pierre. They were the cream of the crop in the East. Obviously, they won the Stanley Cup. But just the way they were built was it's not that it's a new model for the NHL, but it's a model they've shown success. And that success came from depth. Up front, they had no more star power and scoring power than the Toronto Maple Leafs. In net, they certainly didn't. They literally changed their goaltender in the Stanley Cup final, but they got it done through a top to bottom 4-line performance and some very, very good special teams, right? So is this not exactly all of the areas the Toronto Maple Leafs addressed depth and special teams and net minding in the offseason?
Yeah, and we don't have to rehearse that. You nailed that, Kyle, 100%. So let's just do this for the fans at home. One of the things that separates Carolina from a lot of teams, they have legitimate first shutdown tandem in Jalen Chatfield and Slavin, Jacob Slavin. Then you look at what the found money they got was with their second tandem with Sean Walker and Keandre Miller. People don't talk enough about what those guys brought to the party. So they've got 4 defensemen. They can shut you down. They can play on the road. They can play at home. They can match up against your top 2 lines, and it causes a problem. But if you look at Toronto's roster, just think about it. Would you trade Austin Matthews 1-for-1 for Sebastian Aho? Like if you were, I would never do that. Austin Matthews is ahead of Sebastian Aho. Willie, tell me a player. Is Seth Jarvis a better player than Willie Nylander? I don't think so. And Seth Jarvis is a really good player. Like you start going over the rosters. I think Taylor Hall's a really good player. I do. But if you look at an older Taylor Hall, which he is right now, versus a younger Matthew Nyes, like Matthew Nyes is really like, so you start looking at it. You've got Gavin McKenna, you got Easton Cowan, Johnny T. Like you start throwing the names into the hopper for Toronto and just compare them to Carolina's roster, which I really admire and appreciate and respect the way they put it together. Star power for star power, who's got more?
Yeah, but which team plays as a team?
That's the question. And that goes back to what I said off the start, Dan, and you're so spot on. What I said at the start is the start matters for Toronto. Jim Hiller's message has to resonate. And I want to give credit, Dan, where credit's due. Kyle's talked about this a lot. Training camp and how these guys buy into the message early on. Kyle, we've been talking about this probably since the middle of June. You know, what's training camp going to look like? And I think you nailed that. And the more I thought about it, the more I think you're right. Training camp's going to matter for this group. A lot of times it doesn't matter for a lot of teams. For this group, it's going to matter.
And sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask about Gavin McKenna. I was changing.
Well, let me go ahead with something first because I want to expand on something you just said. Which team plays as a team? Because I think what we saw last year was Carolina. Everything we're discussing right now is completely theoretical. This is on paper. We don't know how these guys play together. The nucleus of Carolina's team was not a player on the ice. It was the coach behind the bench, Rod Brindamore. He asserted himself, and they played in his manner, and they brought those 4 lines together, the special teams together. It all came from him. I think it's pretty clear that he was the nucleus of that team's success. Is Hiller capable of doing that in Toronto?
I think he is, but we're going to find out a lot at the beginning of the year. I think it's a fair question. I also want to give credit where credit's due. Rod Brindamore is a really important voice within the confines of that organization, Carolina. Don't discount what Timmy Gleason does with their defense. I think the job he did improving guys was phenomenal. It was off the charts. Toronto's got to see that same improvement with their defensemen this year at the NHL level. And then don't sleep on what Jeff Daniels did as a forward coach and a special teams coach. He did a fantastic. So, we talk about Hiller. I think the assistants, the new assistants in particular in Toronto, are going to matter a lot. And if those guys can have the same impact that a Gleason has had or a Daniels has had down in Carolina, that's going to make a big difference too. I didn't see players in Toronto getting better last year in particular. And even the year before, I didn't see a lot of guys getting better.
Here's what Brindamore has that I don't think any other coach has in the NHL is players are slightly terrified of him. I have looked into that man's eyes, and I've had him look at me like, what are you talking about, kid? And he has that with players. And it's not in an old school coach's way where you single out a player and ridicule them. He just has that sense about him where they're like, we better do what he says because I'm scared as hell about this guy.
When you walk into the dressing room there, you see Rod Brindamore as a Stanley Cup champion, as a captain of the team in 2006. So you got the Stanley Cup over your head, and you see Rod Brindamore, who was the captain. Now he's your coach. I've told this story before. I don't think I've bored you guys with it, but it'll be quick. I was doing a Carolina-Washington playoff series, and I like to get to the rink early. It was around 7:15, 7:30 in the morning. I walk into the rink in Washington, and I'm going down to the dressing rooms because that's where you get the free coffee because all the trainers are there, and you hang around and talk to the trainers. So I'm there, and I start hearing this noise, bing, bing, bing. and it sounds like somebody's dropping weights on the floor. I'm 7:30, 7:15 in the morning. What's going on? And it's dark, and I hear music, so I figured it must be an extra player. It's Rod Brindamore doing deadlifts, and he's jacking it up. He's got his earbuds in, but he's also got music, and the trainers go, he does this all the time. You don't think the players know that? He's probably fitter than most of the players. So
no, not probably. He is.
They're probably petrified of him. You're absolutely right.
So Dan, can you actually go to your point about Gavin McKenna as well there too?
Okay, here's my theory about McKenna.
Yeah.
Austin Matthews has had buffer players to take the heat off him before with Marner and Nylander. But I think this is a different buffer when you've got a first round selection, first pick overall. It's a new sense of, okay, finally, not all the eyes are on me. Not that Austin Matthews is feeling that, but he knows it.
He does. I think it's a great point. And I'll add one more thing. Matt Sundin was a first overall pick. Austin Matthews was a first overall pick. When you have those guys internally that somebody like Gavin McKenna can go to for advice and help, it makes a huge difference. It makes people will marvel at the career Sidney Crosby has had in Pittsburgh. His tenant, when he broke into the league as an 18-year-old, was a captain of the team, Mario Lemieux. Think about all
his
the rough
landlord
water Sid had to go through, and he had somebody there that could cultivate him as a first overall pick who was seen as a savior of a franchise, just like Mario was. Mario saved the franchise in Pittsburgh 3 different times, twice as a player and once as an owner. And I think that helps a lot. If you were to ask Sid, he'd probably tell you, big reason why the early part of his career was so good, he could rely on Mario. I think Gavin's going to have the same thing, especially with Austin there and with Matt Sundin above it.
And further to the McKenna talk as well, too, it's such an interesting way for someone with his potential to enter the NHL because he's entering with a team that has a set of expectations placed upon them now because of the offseason moves and quite frankly, because of the names on that roster. But the expectation does not rest squarely on his shoulders. All he can do is help while he learns. And it's not like when Bedard entered the league and you're instantly the best player on your team because he's not. He's not the first, second, probably not the third best player on that team unless we see something remarkable right from the get-go.
If he could have the same kind of rookie year that Macklin Celebrini had out in San Jose, it would be off the charts. And Macklin had no supporting cast pretty much at all out there. That just shows you how good Macklin is. I don't think right now at this point, Gavin McKenna is as good as Macklin, obviously at the same age, but he's pretty darn close. Where I think he really has to be a huge influencer on this team is on the power play, because that will play into his strengths and it will allow him to avoid matchups and will allow him early on in his career to avoid some of the physicality that star players have to face in matchup games, especially on the road. At home, it's a little bit easier and they'll be able to hide him. But on the road, especially if he's playing, let's just say with Nylander, for the sake of argument, with Nylander and Matthews, you're going to get a heavy pounding early on. So where he's got to be really thorough and good is going to be on the power play. And I believe he can really do that.
Want to do some 1 degree of Pierre?
I love doing that. By the way, Dano, I love seeing you at the golf course. Watching you at the golf course in pictures is phenomenal.
Thanks, buddy. Driver was not working that day, but Rochi came through.
I also like seeing Dan at baseball training camp for the record. But,
oh, boy. The man, the myth, the legend, Ronnie Hextall.
Oh,
so much stuff there. I think his coming out party really was winning the Conn Smythe as a player on a losing team. Not a lot of people have obviously done that over the course of their career. So Ronnie,
that was when the tongue came. We all saw the tongue.
Yeah, Ronnie was an amazingly competitive person. I had a chance to coach against him when he was in Philly. I had a chance to coach against him when he was with Quebec, and I had a chance to coach against him when he was with the Islanders. So I see a lot of different degrees of Ronnie Hextall over the course of my career. The last time I talked to Ronnie, who was still the general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins, I was actually doing the draft in Montreal, and we had a really nice chat on the riser. That's the last time I saw him, so that'd be like 2022. Just a tremendous hockey man, somebody that had huge passion for the game. I'll never forget how committed he was to trying to make the Philadelphia Flyers great again. And I think he got the rug pulled out from under him a little bit early. Eventually he ends up in Pittsburgh. It's just the wrong time to be in Pittsburgh when he went there. I had a lot of respect and time for Ronnie. Really,
Who had a better shot? He had a great shot. I also saw Peter Ing, former Leaf goalie, in warm up once, and I couldn't believe his shot. Of all the goalies you witnessed, who had the best shot for a goalie?
Marty Brodeur.
Yeah.
Marty was amazing, but I'll tell you, under the radar, Marty Turco, the pride of Sault Ste. Marie and the University of Michigan. And another under the radar is a former Leaf, a former Dallas Star, and a former Chicago Blackhawk, Eddie Belfour.
Didn't Turco have to switch hands to shoot?
He could do it both ways. He
Okay.
chose to do that. Marty was amazing. And then I'll give you one more under the radar. Mike Smith, who used to run with Marty Turco. Those were the guys that were really under the radar, Turco and Smith in particular. But I've been watching Brodeur since he's been 16 years old. He was playing for Montreal Bourassa, a AAA team in the East End of Montreal. I can tell you, I never saw a guy handle the puck like him, ever.
Yeah. Tough to argue. Thanks, buddy.
Love it. Thanks a lot, Dano. Thanks a lot, Kyle.